Welcome to What Do You Want to Do, the show that will hopefully help you figure out what you want to do in life or reconnect you to what you love doing. Each show has a guest who is doing what they want to do, whether it's in their career or in addition to their regular job. Most importantly, we want to help you realize that no matter your age, you too can do what you want to do if you have the will to do it. Now here's your host, Leonard Kaplan.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of What Do You Want to Do? I'm Leonard Kaplan, and this is part 2 of my exclusive interview with internationally known author of 27 books, Roland Merullo. Such books as Revere Beach Boulevard, Breakfast with Buddha, Lunch with Buddha, Dinner with Buddha, and Dessert with Buddha, plus the book we talked about last week, From These Broken Streets, set in Naples, Italy during World War II. We talked about making the book. This week, I asked him, what if that book was made into a movie? How would that go? And we got into a discussion about options, movie studios. What's it like to make deals with these studios? Is it easy or difficult to make a book or a screenplay into an actual movie? A lot of work. We also discussed colleges, working at a college. When you are a writer and you're teaching writing, what's that like? Finally, I asked him about young and old. If you want to be a writer, what do you do? And Roland had some good advice for everyone. So stay with us. I'm sure there'll be something for everyone. So how did you go about finding a publisher? And that publisher has been with you since the beginning?
No, I've had a multitude of publishers, and the business now has really changed a lot. And most of my editors are gone. I've had 5 agents. Many of them have retired. Some of them have retired. Some of them I left. I think one left me. It's very complicated. The relationship, the key is the agent. I think if I have a good agent now, and I've had 5 or 6 of them,
Mm-hmm.
and they know the business. I don't know the business. I'm here in my little house in the woods of Western Massachusetts. I don't know. I don't have lunch with editors in New York City.
Right.
The agent does that, and they know what those editors are looking for, what would be a waste of time to show them. They do all the negotiating, they do all the foreign sales, they do all the film options, and they take usually 15% of whatever I make.
From These Broken Streets, I think would make a hell of a good movie.
I've heard that from people. The problem is it takes an awful lot of money to make a movie.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of options. I've had about 10 options, which is somebody wants the exclusive rights to a book for a limited period of time. And they pay me, sometimes it's like $10,000, sometimes 15,000, sometimes 7,500. They pay me to have those rights. And at the end of 18 months, they can renew the rights, they can let them go, or they can buy the rights and make a film. I've never had that happen, but that's a lot more money if that happens.
Right. So I've been teaching English at Marblehead High this year.
Oh, yeah?
And it's a 1-year appointment. And the process, the curriculum, requires you to delve into classic books or plays like 12 Angry Men and The Odyssey, things like that. Now, quite often, my students and I have discussions about theme and symbolism and metaphor and simile and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do authors, and in particular you, write a book and think of the theme, or do you just think of the story? It's my contention that in many cases where symbolism is discussed, I think that a lot of the times critics put those ideas in people. I don't know.
I think that's true. I agree with you. The symbolism and theme may come from the psychology or the psychological depths of the author, and it many times is subconscious, I think, and the critic draws that out and points to it and makes it into a conscious discussion. But sure, sometimes I think of a theme or a metaphor, obviously on purpose, and when I mostly in the rewriting, after I finish a book, I'll go back over it many, many times. And may try to align something in the third chapter with something in the 23rd chapter, so the theme is consistent, or there may be an echo in there of a metaphorical echo or something like that. But mostly I want to tell a story. I mean, I'm mostly out to entertain and provoke in the sense not of provoking to anger, but provoking to consider something.
That's actually, what I was hoping you would say, because it's kind of a suspicion that I've had in my mind for a long time, even when I was in school. I remember when on the other end being a student, and I'm thinking, the author couldn't have been thinking of all this all at the same time.
They can. I mean, there are highly intellectual writers who maybe are mining that particular or that vein of whatever theme or metaphor, but I'm not one of those. I mean, I'm not. Um, I try not to write books that you'd read on an airplane and then throw away. I also try not to write books that you would have to have a grasp of Shakespeare or Greek philosophy in order to understand. I'm just not that kind of a person.
Now, you've taught at colleges. You were a writer in residence at North Shore, I believe,
Yeah,
and a bunch of other places. And I found I taught college a little bit myself at Endicott College. I
yeah,
didn't like it. I like teaching younger people better, I guess.
yeah. I liked the people I taught. I didn't like the academic politics.
Yeah. Oh, I can
I
bet.
taught at Bennington and Amherst, and Amherst wasn't bad. Bennington was horrible. Amherst had its moments too. That I don't understand why that is, but college professors, who many of whom have a really nice life, can be mini dictators and do really awful. I used to say I worked in the Soviet Union. I used to say um, the KGB was easier to deal with than some of my colleagues in academia,
Wow.
which is obviously an exaggeration, but there was some nasty stuff that went on, really awful stuff.
So I want to get into that a little bit,
Yeah,
specifically the proliferation of political agendas on college campuses. You work full time at colleges, so you would see it more than I did. I've just taught a couple of classes here and there. So is that part of the problem that you're talking about? Why it was
that's
such
a
a war
that,
zone?
that's a different problem for me, and that I really retired before that from full time teaching. I did some MFA low residency teaching after that era or during that era, and I think it's largely stupid, and I'm glad I'm not involved in that kind of an environment. I mean, it comes from compassion. I do think it has good roots. People want to not offend others and want to be inclusive, which is important. They want to give voice to groups of people whose voices were silenced over the centuries. I think that's good. They go to ridiculous extremes now where you can't talk about a book that has a word in it that's offensive to you. It's both the right and the left. I mean, the right censors stuff, sexual stuff, gender orientation, and so on, and the left censors language, and it's ridiculous. Use it as a teaching method. If Huckleberry Finn contains a word that's a terribly offensive word, which it does, read the book for its tremendous value and talk about that word and say, this is a horrible word. It's used in hatred, it's used to wound people, and it's caused tremendous problems in the United States. And that's why we don't use it now. Good people don't use that word. But in the context of the book at that time period, it was normal. And so to take the book out of classrooms and libraries because of that word, it's just so awful. My politics are to the left of center, and to see my people doing that is particularly offensive to me. The stuff on the right, being afraid to have a story about a gay person, is absurd. It's childish. it's really purely American. I mean, Americans have a streak of Puritanism that's just has not died.
It seemed like it did, like when we were in the 70s,
Yeah,
anything could get published and
yeah,
not be controversial.
yeah,
Movies,
yeah,
everything. Now they're going back into history
yeah,
when things were more primitive socially, and
yeah,
Song of the South is banned,
yeah.
and historical films like Birth of a Nation. Yes, there's a lot of stuff in there. When I used to teach media literacy, I would show like Charlie Chaplin films like The Kid, where the woman protagonist was pregnant, and that was her obstacle in life
Yeah.
because an unmarried woman couldn't be that way.
Right.
I explained, it was middle school at the time. I explained in those days you had to be married. That was the kind
Yeah,
of a society that it was. It's an opportunity for a history lesson, not
exactly.
something that should be, it's feared like today.
It's an
Actually,
opportunity to learn and open minds and make sure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And if you
exactly.
take that away, what ends up happening is you repeat the mistakes of the past. And I spent a lot of time in the Soviet Union where they had something called socialist realism, which is every piece of art had to serve a political purpose.
Oh
You
boy.
couldn't paint a picture of a beautiful landscape unless you put a crane in the background that was building a building for to show that communism was providing housing for people. Dr. Zhivago, which is one of the great novels of all time, could not be published because it didn't fit in with the party line. And so to see that in America now in different clothing, but it's the same beast, is just very painful, very, very painful for me.
I agree. I agree. Things are becoming, not just in Florida too. It's just
Not just
everywhere.
in Florida. No, no, Florida is the shining, awful example, but no, not just in Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, as a writer yourself, when you were teaching writing, I presume,
Yeah.
didn't that get in the way of your writing, and didn't you resent it, kind of?
I didn't resent it because I had to make a living for my wife and kids, but
Yeah.
I taught at Bennington College, and they wanted me to teach year round, and I said no, I'm only going to teach one term a year.
Hmm.
Financially, that was more difficult, but if I had taught both terms, I would have never written another book. It,
Yeah.
it takes from the same place, and you only have so much juice, and I felt like it would have wrung me dry. So I taught for one semester. I didn't do any writing at all, and the day that I was finished, I came home and started to work on a book.
So let's go back, because this show is called What Do You Want to Do? And a lot of young people, former students of mine, and other young people that I meet will hopefully be listening and watching this.
Yeah.
What would you tell aspiring writers of any age, young people who want to get into it for a career or a hobby, or people my age? What advice would you give them? What mistakes should they avoid?
I think it depends on what you want, Len. If you want to make money from it, if you want to be famous, if you just want to finish something, if you want to write something for your friends, there are all different categories of writing, and my advice would be different for all of them. The general thing I could say is that if that's something you want to do, you should do it, and you should really not just talk about doing it, but you should do it. And I think that advice goes for anything in life. And I always say to my kids, shoot for the moon and take what you get, but don't limit your ambitions ahead of time. The writing world especially will limit them without question, especially if you want to be rich and famous. Probably that won't happen. But try for it if that's what you want. If you just and work hard at it, and you have to become toughened and be able to take rejection and criticism, which many people cannot do, or you don't learn. And some of criticism will be unfair. Some of it will be harsh. If you look at any of my books on Amazon, there'll be a review, 5 stars. This book changed my life, the best book I ever read. and the next review will be 1 star, waste of money, I couldn't finish it. And you have to be able to deal with that,
Yeah.
even if it's just at a basic level. The other thing I would say is be careful who you show your writing to. If you're someone who loves lyrical poetry and your husband or best friend is a mechanical engineer who reads those kinds of engineering documents, that person might not be the best, even if you love that, even if it's your best friend, might not be the best person to show your writing to and try to get feedback from. So I would be a little careful, especially in the early going when people are sensitive. Choose carefully who your readers will be, and make sure that you're going to get some kind of positive criticism that's encouraging and not um, it doesn't dissuade you from that passion.
Roland Merullo, thank you for being on What Do You Want to Do? And it's been a pleasure having you and talking to you after all these years.
Been my pleasure, Lena, and I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the invitation, and it's really great to reconnect with you. And I hope we can sit down and have a meal.
I do too. Let's do that real soon. Thank you for joining me here on What Do You Want to Do? I'm Leonard Kaplan, and we'll see you next time. And until then, what do you want to do?